This is Dr. Johnson, and I'm giving a summary of Sidman's introduction to coercion and its fallout. I'm starting with this slide because I'm a developmental psychologist, and this is where it fit as I was reading in my mind. And this model by Bronfenbrenner, some of you may be familiar, at the center is the individual, and in the microsystem are all the people who know the person by name and interact with them on a daily basis. The mesosystem, it looks at the relationship between the members of the microsystem, about how does this family get along with the school. The school gets how does the school react to the family's religious practices. How does the family get along with the neighbors in the building or in the neighborhood? Then at the next level, we have institutions that are impacting this person but may not know them individually, like what's the policy where the mom or dad works that influences this person, like what's their policy on staying home with a sick child? Or this is also where the insurance company would fit, and the insurance policy on whether or not they're going to provide therapy for a particular condition would it be impacting this child. And then this is the community at large and the extended family. All beyond that, the macro system is going to be more of the customs and the values and the laws of a community, of a state, of a country, or of human beings around the world at that moment in time. And Bronfenbrenner added another system called the chronosystem to recognize that these relationships and systems in institutions change through time. But this is where I saw coercion fitting, was in the values. And that what it's representing then is that coercion is pervasive, he is saying, through all levels of our environment and in our world, at the level of laws, in the workplace, it's in the school, and it's in the home. And as well, it's in the rule of law, and it's how nations interact with other nations. In the home, it could show up as physical, verbal, or emotional coercion, domestic violence between partners, child abuse. At work, the employer may be threatening the employee that they're going to take their job away. The employee may threaten to strike so that shuts down all work, all production, all profit, and social relations deteriorate to mere bargaining positions and negotiations. At school, the child is punished for not learning, and they consequently learn to avoid the labor of learning, and the practice of coercion in the school becomes a standard practice. Whether it's at home or work or school, these coercive practices just continue from one generation to the next as the way things are. We know that punishment is delivered for breaking the law, and yet punishment has not been a sufficient deterrent for crime. And in fact, punishment may even provide satisfaction for those who seek revenge on lawmakers. Like, nobody tells me what to do. I can't be controlled. Among nations, we see the buildup of nuclear arms. It creates jealousy and animosity between nations when there's this coercive stance, and it leads to counter control and terrorism and replaces diplomacy. We see survival by counter threats. Where does behavior analysis fit into this? He thinks that behavior analysis is questioning the desirability and long-term utility of punishment, threat, and relief from punishment and threat. And we've been studying this. I mean, when we saw the video that recapped operant conditioning, we saw that outside of positive reinforcement, every other condition represented something negative. That is, in order to be reinforced for putting on the seatbelt, there had to be a buzzer, an aversive buzzer. To the positive punishment, the girl was detention, and then she lost access to her cell phone. So behavior analysis has been looking at the impact of punishment, threat, and relief from punishment and threat. Yeah, he's citing the purpose of this book is that the research that has been done on coercion has not been shared with the public at large, and he thinks that it needs to be communicated. He hopes to communicate that information through this book. And he also, through that, wants to acquaint the public at large favorably with the science of behavior analysis, because he wants behavior analysis to be seen as what can provide an alternative to coercion. In behavior analysis, he's saying the area where punishments receive the greatest attention has been self-destruction by persons with intellectual disabilities or autism spectrum disorder, environmental destruction, violations of social norms, and conduct that distresses family and community. Some of you may have seen or participated in a takedown. A takedown is where two people are going to try to safely stop someone who's engaging in a behavior that's very unsafe to them or to others, and they're going to lower them to the ground and hold them on the ground until they start showing signs of calm. He's saying that kind of intervention is exceptional, it's in marginal cases, and coercion is not the basis of behavior analysis, and it's not even an essential component. He takes issue with therapists who use punishment or coercive methods and then justify it by saying that they're not subject to laws or other regulations because they're qualified to do this through their training. He says there's no training he's aware of in psychology, psychiatry, education, or behavior analysis that qualifies anyone to use punishment as a standard procedure. And he thinks the public is justified to be concerned when shock and other instruments of coercion are employed. Those who use coercion or shock or punishment, but justify so by saying, well, I meant well, I have good intention. He's saying, well, that doesn't exempt you from two things. One, the empirical principle that coercion produces counter-control, and the other law of behavior that of negative reinforcement of punishment. What that means is that if you use a punishment or coercion and the behavior of concern stops, you've removed an aversive. So it worked for you, and you're more likely to repeat the use of punishment. He's also concerned that just a few who are justifying coercion and punishment techniques will be taken as representative, and that the public will lump all behavior analysts together under the stereotype of coercer. He says what we've discovered is alternatives to coercion, and we believe we can use behavior analysis can be applied to reduce coercion across all environments: education, business, diplomacy, law, family. Now he addresses the critics, and remember, this introduction is a summary of what he hopes to tell us through the rest of the book. When critics say you are doing your research in laboratories, does that generalize to outside the lab? He said, yes, we've demonstrated that. Can conduct itself be analyzed? Like other sciences, like a chemical or like biology? And he's saying, well, we've found the behavior of lower organisms to be orderly. They're saying, well, that's fine for lower organisms, but can that be applied to humans? He says, yes, we've demonstrated that in multiple settings. Well, what about more complex behaviors like language, creativity, mental development, art appreciation? And he's saying, yes, we can study that. Well, if you can study people, doesn't that dehumanize us? And are scientists trying to control us or control the world? And his answer is, well, the findings from non-humans have been useful, and the scientific approach is useful. And if we don't share what we know, that's dangerous, because coercion is responsible for many of society's most serious problems. And we know how coercion works, and we also know alternatives. This research is then can't be done with humans because it would be cruel and wrong. So it's done with animals. So then critics question the use of animals in the experimentation. And he's doing something of a risk-benefit analysis. He's saying that the behavioral research on coercion has to balance the shocks and other discomforts suffered by a relatively small number of non-human subjects against the potential prevention of intense pain we inflict on each other, and the reduction of the number of hopelessly warped human lives that are a characteristic outcome of coercive control. Inflict. It should be inflict. I'll fix that. And then he's asking, the critics ask, well, do we even have to do research? Don't we already know what the impact of coercion is? And his answer, I would say, in general, is, well, if we knew it, we would stop doing it. But we see all about us that it continues, so it's overwhelming evidence that consequences of coercion are not understood at all. So in summary, he is saying that if we realize that the impact of coercion was mistrust, fear, aggression, general unhappiness in so many individual and social relationships, then even if we didn't totally abandon punishment, we certainly wouldn't use coercion as much as we do now. We would use it sparingly. More to the point, he's saying we would make the world a far safer, less threatening, less stressful, and more joyful place to live in now than it is for many people in the world. Now, I'm going to put 2 questions for reflection. He's saying that there are alternatives to coercion. And as he's talked about how pervasive it is through all levels of society, I would like for you to share with us, with me, if you have seen an example where a particular family or school or classroom, or you can think of a country that has chosen an alternative to coercion, and share that example with us. Like, is anyone trying it, and how's that working for them? And then the second question I have is about the animal experimentation. He has said that thoughtless cruelty is to be condemned. He's not endorsing thoughtless cruelty. However, he thinks that investigators who inflict pain on subjects to study coercion are not being cruel because they have desirable outcomes to prevent pain. And I want to know how does that resonate with you? How do you feel about that? If someone were to question you about animal research on coercion, how would you feel about it? How would you answer? There's no right or wrong answer. I just respect hearing your opinion on it.